Okay, pre-roll. All right, starting. So for this project, we're going to do a human hand. We're going to do a realistic hand. It's perfectly acceptable to use your hand as reference. So you can, because it's right in front of you, it's kind of the easiest thing to look at. So you have very good detailed information. The project files for this project are on the file server. So if I go to public and then PC server and then intro to modeling, in the ref folder, the folder you're looking for is Maya Human Hand Part 1. So I'm going to go ahead and grab that guy and copy him off onto the desktop. All right, cool. Now that I have that in there, there's just reference of like, this is one I built in class for one of my classes, so it's just kind of showing you what the end result's going to look like. And then there's a reference image that we're going to use to aid us in the construction. So this is considered an organic model. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use primitive shapes, and we're going to do sub-level mesh editing. We're going to combine multiple primitive shapes to create a complex organic form, and then once we do that, we're going to shape that form, and it's going to end up looking just like a human hand. And I can also show you guys results from previous classes because I checked these out last night. I forgot. It's been a while since I've taught this class here. And I looked at some of the old ones and I was like, oh, those are pretty good. So here's an example of what you guys will likely end up with. So at the end of each class, I take like the top results and then I'll put it up best of semester. And so what I'm about to show you is the best of the semester from the last time I taught this course. So these are rooms, but in here there were some hands and I was kind of happy with the ones I saw, so I'll show them to you. Okay, so this is kind of what you guys can expect, likely, if you work hard and listen to me. That's a pretty decent end result, I thought. We're going to do a head model in here too, but there's a nice hand. Good presentation on that one. All right, so I always like you guys to know the final outcome. So we saw that. And those are real students, so that's, you know, now you can try to beat them. I love that when you do. All right, so we're going to get started. I'm going to go ahead and launch Maya. Okay, once we have Maya, I'm going to bring in my reference image for this project. And the reference image is not intended to be a blueprint. It's more just a guide for us to get our base mesh constructed very quickly. And then we kind of stop using it once we have our base mesh built. But it does help in building the base mesh quickly and kind of getting the proportion correct. So I'm going to create a reference plane. So I'm going to make a plane here. I'm going to scale it up to be about the same size as the grid. I'm going to get rid of the redundant edges by going into the construction history and reducing those to 1. I'm going to move this below the grid a little bit so that when I create new stuff, it doesn't overlap. And then I'm finally going to make a layer and assign it to a layer and call this my hand ref _L, so that I have a layer so that I can quickly reference it to make it so I can't edit it or hide it. And so I do want to be able to edit it because I'm going to put that image on there. So I'm going to right click and say assign new material, and then I'm going to do a Lambert material because it doesn't need to be pretty. If it needs to be pretty, we want to use the AI standard. If we're just using it as a construction aid, then we want to use the crappiest shader that's available to us, which is a Lambert. And so I'm going to put Lambert material on here. I know that because it says Lambert 2. And in the color node, I want to click on the little checker box, which is the create render node. And I'm going to apply a file texture, which is just an image. And then I have to tell Maya where to find that image from by clicking on the little folder here. And this image happens to be on my desktop, and it is right there, hand ref, Mr. UTeacher. in bold red so that it keeps my students awake, and angry so that they can model. And then I'm going to hit the 6 key to show it. And interestingly enough, if you can hit the 6 key to shade things, the 5 key will just be shaded. 6 key is shaded with texture map. 4 key is wireframe. Or you can just hit this little icon right here, which does the same thing. So that is textured with shaded. And then I'm also going to turn on my show my edges on top of my polygons, because when we get into sub-object mesh editing, it's really, really imperative to have that guy enabled. Okay, so the first shape I'm going to start with, I'm going to break this hand down in terms of shapes, is I'm going to start with a box. So we're going to start modeling the palm and the wrist, and that is most easily accomplished by using a box. So I'm going to make a box here. I'm going to pull it over. I'm going to go into the top view, and I'm going to go into the shading, and I'm going to turn on my X-ray, and then I'm also going to turn on my texture map. And the X-ray just makes it so that I can see through my polygons and see all the textures. And then I also want to turn on the edged faces there. All right, cool. And then now I'm going to scale this guy up to be about the same width as my wrist in the image. And then I'm going to go like that. So that's the beginning of my hand model. And then I've noticed here that if I go to perspective, it's paper thin. So the proportion I want to use here is I just want to look at my wrist. And what I usually do is like take a pen and put it up on the top part of my wrist and mark it with my finger. And then if you go to the side, you can figure out the ratio there. So as it turns out, my wrist is about 2/3 as tall as it is wide. So that's the ratio I'm going to use. Or you can just eyeball it and be like, yeah, that's about the right thickness for my wrist, which is what I'm doing right now. That also works. Provided you have a calibrated eye, it works fine. Okay, so I got the base there for my wrist, and now I'm going to start extruding. So the way I have this reference image set up is that wherever there's a wrinkle, that means that that's kind of a crumple zone. So wherever you see a wrinkle, that's kind of like edge 1, edge 2 in the middle, and then edge 3. That's how many edges I'm intending to use. So I'm going to just grab these vertices here and pull them up to that first wrinkle. And then now I'm going to start extruding. I'm going to go into face mode, and I'm going to say extrude face, pull this one out. And when I pull it out, I'm going to go into the top view, and I'm going to kind of place it the right spot. And then I'm also going to move the vertices to kind of shape it. So I'm marquee selecting instead of click selecting. The difference you guys know, hopefully by now. It won't let me click right. There we go. Click selecting, if I do that, it's only going to, weird, it's not letting me do it. It's only going to select the top vertex, but if I marquee select, it's going to select both vertices. So there's a big difference in this, because if you don't do that, what's going to happen is you're going to move the vertex, and the one below it's going to stay where it is, and your mesh is going to get all jumbled up. So when you're doing this, if you hear me say marquee select, you want to make sure that you're selecting both the top and the bottom verts at the same time. All right, cool. And then if I look at my side profile of my hand too, at that wrinkle part, at this wrinkle, my wrist is about the same width, so I don't need to do anything. But on the next extrude, so if I come in here and go face extrude, and I'm going to put it to the next wrinkle, this is where my hand actually starts to drastically change shape. So on this wrinkle, if I look at my palm, it starts to get fatter and kind of starts to create like a wedge down here. So I'm going to wedge that shape like so. I'm also going to move this up because it's starting to go through my plane. I could hide the grid because it's not really helping me. All right, so there we go. So we're getting a shape here. If I hit the 3 key, doesn't look like much. Kind of looks like a stuffed donut or something at the moment. I'm going to put another, actually I was going to put another edge on the back. Yeah, I think that's how I want to do it. I'm going to say insert edge loop, and what I want to do is just kind of square that wrist off in the back so that it doesn't over erode. There we go. And that looks pretty decent. And now I'm ready to keep modeling. So I'm going to hit the 1 key to get back to my control cage mesh. And then I just want to keep extruding. So I'm going to grab this face again, and I'm going to extrude it forward. And then for this one, this is where the thumb is actually going to grow out of. And so I just realized that my reference plane was not templated, so it was getting in the way. So I template that guy. All right, cool. Back on track. So this polygon right here is where the thumb is going to eventually go on. You can see that opening right there. And then this opening here, that polygon is basically where the fingers are going to go. So for this particular extrude, I want to put this one kind of like right there. And I'm marquee selecting and like right there. So, or actually, no, I'm going to put it right back there. All right, cool. And then I'm going to extrude this one more time. I want to pay attention to the shape here of the palm. And so I'm looking at my palm from the side profile, and it kind of got fat here at the palm, and then it starts to taper up here towards the fingers. So I'm going to adjust that shape right there so it kind of creates a wedge. And now if I 3-key that out and smooth it out, we can see, oh, I guess it's starting to kind of look like a hand a little bit. All right, cool. And then I'm going to come in here to face mode, and I'm going to extrude this guy one more time. And then I'm going to come over here, and on this edge, I'm going to place it right on these knuckles here. So right there. And now you can see where I kind of want them to go right on the border of those joints. But you can see that that's not possible because I don't have enough edges in here at the moment. So now in order to add more shape to this model and make it look a little bit better, I need to add more edges. So now I'm going to come in here and go, okay, how many edges do I need for 4 fingers to go in there? So you could count this way, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? Or you could just count the middle. I could just go, I need 1, 2, 3. So I just need 3 edges in there to create 3 holes, or 4 holes for fingers. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say edit mesh, insert edge loop, and I want a multiple number, and I want to do 3. And I'm going to go just click there, and now I've got my 3 edges that go all the way back through the hand. I'm going to come in here to vertex mode. I'm still marquee selecting, and I do want to move these edges so that they go, the bones kind of are split right down the middle here. Let's see, yeah. So I'm just going to reorganize these a little bit. That looks pretty good. And then I'm going to pull these up so that the intersections of those bones are like right there on the model. All right, cool. And now I can hit the 3 key, and there we go. It kind of looks like a Flintstones hand. It's too boxy at the moment. All right, cool, but it won't be hard to fix this once we get going. And I made this one just a little bit too, got that one out of proportion a little bit. So we want these here at the front to be relatively square and relatively the same size. And so I just kind of adjusted that a little bit to get that to happen. Okay, cool. And now we're ready to start shaping this thing a little bit, because right now it's kind of way too boxy. So in order to round this guy off so that it's not like a brick here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to insert an edge loop. Oops. I want to insert an edge loop all the way around, and I don't want to do multiple loops this time. I just want to do one. So I'm going to put one loop kind of like dead center here. And then now I want to do a shaping pass where I kind of debox the model. And so what that looks like is this. I grab these vertices here, and I just kind of like round them off. So you can see that's rounding. I'm gonna do that pretty much all over the model. I'm gonna round. For this one, they're all kind of the same. So I'm just gonna grab all of those at once and round them. And if you're watching this wondering, how did he do that? He kind of clicked one vertex, and then he selected all the vertices in the middle just by double clicking the last one. Yeah, what I did is, if you Maya has this feature. If you select a component and hold down the shift key and then select another component that's in the same row as that one, it'll select all of the vertices in between. It's kind of a time saver. I'll do the same thing here. And I just want to round this off. All right, cool. And then finally, I've got this blocky wrist section down here, and I'm going to round it off a bit. There we go. And so now my forearm is a little bit more organic and rounded, so it's looking a little bit better. All right, cool. But on hands, they kind of have different shape on the bottom versus the top. So on the top, there's actually a little bit of an arc in the palm, and so I want to model that arc into my hand. So what I'm going to do here is come in here and grab all of these vertices, and I want to put a bend in the palm so that it kind of arcs like this for the fingers. And so I'm going to deselect these guys, that one, and then I'm going to pull that up, and so now you can see that we're getting that subtle arc shape, and then we've also got the little heart shape in the base of the palm where the fat part of the thumb meets the wrist. And then I'll just add a little bit of an arc here from here, just so that's not so flat. That's a little bit more organic. And I'm pretty happy with that shape. It looks pretty good. All right, cool. And then I accidentally did that. There we go. Tumble mode, I keep doing this by accident, or it's called walk mode, is Alt X. So if you're annoyingly bumping that like I am and you don't want to be in walk mode, Alt X will get you out. All right, cool. So I have this palm kind of somewhat shaped a little bit. Just gonna round that just a little bit. All right, now I'm ready to start building my polygon fingers. And the best and fastest way that I've found to start making fingers is to use a cylinder, because fingers are basically a cylindrical shape. And so I'm going to start with a primitive here, and then I'm going to build the most generic finger that I have, which is my middle finger. And so yeah, it's also fun to build middle fingers. Everyone loves it. So we get to kill two birds with one stone. So I'm going to change the height here. And then in terms of subdivisions, I want 8 going around. And then subdivisions in height, I believe it's 9. It won't really matter here if I'm wrong on this number, because we can edit it later. But I just kind of want to get this thing started. And I'm going to push that finger back in here, and then for the front of the finger, I want to think of this fingertip as like a half dome. And so I don't need the half dome because I'm going to build that with another primitive shape. And so what I want to do at this point is I just want to scale these vertices so that they kind of fit the profile of that finger. And so I'm marquee selecting all of the verts. And then I'm just scaling. Notice I'm not scaling all 3 axes at the same time, because that'll make my finger do weird things like that. I'm actually scaling at just 2 axes at a time to just change the proportion there. And then here I have a knuckle. So again, whenever we see wrinkles, the optimal number is kind of like 3 edges. So, and I put 1 edge at the front, 1 edge in the middle, and 1 edge at the back. That's kind of the minimum number we need in order to deform something and have it keep its volume. So for rigging later, when we basically like puppeteer this thing and animate it, that's kind of the optimal number of edges to preserve that shape. All right, and then I'm going to kind of widen this guy out here at the bottom. And then, oops, I made a mistake. I always do this. I had wrinkles here, and so I want 3 edges there, because that is also a joint. So there we go. And I missed one, so no worries. I'll just insert an edge loop. And now I can shape this a little bit more. So I'm going to go non-uniform. Okay, cool. So I have the shape from the top, and I'm going to move it up into position flush with the palm. But from the side, it basically just looks like a hot dog or a cigar. So that's not really a good finger shape. I also made a mistake here, and I should have deleted this cap before I started. And so cap divisions should have been 0. And look what it did. Oh no, it destroyed my history. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to go into face mode. And again, I'm using that shift click method where I click on one polygon or one face. And if I hold down shift and double click the next one, it'll select the loop all the way around. And then I can delete that. And now that that's an island, I can delete that. So that's kind of the fastest way. But really, I should have turned those caps to 0. And I didn't pay attention. All right, cool. So there we go. I got my fingers shaped. From the top, it looks pretty good. From the side, it doesn't look right. But your finger shape from the side is basically just a wedge. So I'm going to come in here and go like this. Okay, I know that, and somehow I had 3D scaled those, so I'm going to un-3D scale those. I know that this section here is my first knuckle, and that is kind of the smallest. I know that this set of 3 is my second knuckle. Whoops, no. This here is my second knuckle, and so I'm going to scale that down a little bit, and I'm going to include this with it. And so there I kind of have like a 3-tiered, like my finger is the fattest at the base, it's the middle fattest at the middle knuckle, and then the skinniest at the top knuckle. So I'm going to adjust this a little bit so this thing tapers down. My knuckles also let's see here, have the following feature. At the top, they're kind of bulged up a little bit. So I'm going to come in here to the side view and bulge that up a little bit. And then at the base, they kind of taper together. So I'm going to grab all of these vertices here. So if we look at it in 3D, it kind of looks like that. I'm going to push those together because that's a crease point. And then this guy here in the middle kind of creases up like that. So same deal with this one. These all kind of get pulled together. And then the middle one, whoops, the middle one, like Maya's being a little weird with its selection. There we go. Middle one goes like that. Okay, cool. So I've got that shaped like a finger. If I hit the 3 key, and it is actually starting to look like one. And all it's missing now is a fingertip. So for the fingertip, I'm going to use a sphere. And I'm going to rotate this guy down 90 degrees. Bring it up here. And I just need to make sure that it matches the same edge count. And the other thing is, I don't want the poles. So the pole is basically where all the edges meet. And currently the poles, if I pull this sphere out, are on the back and the front. And logically to you guys, it might be like, oh cool, that's where the fingertip is, so that makes sense that all those edges would come to a point. But what happens later is when we go to sculpt this thing and we start adding like fingerprint detail and stuff, that little point at the tip of the finger is actually going to create an artifact, and it's going to be basically bad. So what I want to do instead is I want to pull these poles to the side by rotating them 90 degrees. And I'm actually going to get rid of them. So right now they're triangles. I'm going to turn those into quads, and I'll show you here how to do that in a second. Okay, so I'm going to rotate this guy around, and then I'm going to go into the history for the polysphere, and then it comes out to 6 and 8. I always forget which one is which. I think it's the opposite. This one's 8. This one's 6. Let's see if I did that right. Yep. Okay, cool. And then I'm going to scale this guy down a little bit more. And I don't want the entire sphere. I only want half of it. So you can see that it kind of fits right in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now delete half of that guy. And I'm going to use this to cap my finger. So I'm going to put that in there. And then I'm going to grab both of these guys and combine them. So mesh combine. And then I'm going to go into vertex mode, and I'm going to use the target weld. So I'm going to go into merge vertices and then target weld. And target weld allows us to grab one vertex and then just move it to the vertex we want to weld it to. And so I actually got my edges wrong now that I'm doing this. So I gotta go back to before I deleted that. It needs to be, sorry, I haven't done this one in a while, so I forgot my numbers. It needs to be 6 and 4. There it is. Okay, so 6 and 4. No, 8 and 4. 8 and 4. There it is. And now I'm going to delete the back of it again. And this time it's going to weld up nicely. And the reason I did that is because you just want to have the same number of edges. So see that? Edge, 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 edge. So that this thing will weld together cleanly. And then I'll make the tip a little bit bigger. All right, cool. And scale it non-uniform. There we go. So I'm going to grab these two, and I'm going to say mesh combine. And now again, I'm going to go into vertex mode, and I'm going to say merge vertices, target weld. Just grab them and start working my way around this thing clockwise. Whoops. The target weld does get a little bit finicky sometimes with some graphics cards, and it doesn't work. So if you're trying to like grab it and move it and it's not selecting the right vertex or something, just click away into the empty space and then come back to the vertex you're trying to grab, and most of the time that'll work. Okay, so here we have my fingertip on here, but we've got some evil triangles which are no good on both sides. And if you'll look at that, you might be thinking to yourself, well, if I delete that edge, that becomes a quad. And you would be right. So I'm going to delete that edge right there. And then I'm going to delete the edge right there. Cool. And now I have a quadified fingertip. And I'm ready to start modeling my fingernail. So I'm going to grab the fingertip here. And this right here, these two polygons, faces, basically become the fingernail. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this vert right here, and I'm going to pull it back. Grab these two. And I am actually shift clicking those rather than marquee. I'm sorry, not shift clicking. I am just clicking those instead of marquee clicking because I only want the top vertices. And I'm going to pull those back a little bit. And then now that I have that thing shaped, now I'm going to grab these 3 vertices right here, and I'm just going to pull it down. And see, that starts to look like a fingertip with a fingernail. All right, cool. And that's it, man. We have our base mesh for our finger. Now, the reason I chose the middle finger was because the middle finger, if you look at your fingers, is kind of the one that looks almost like all of them. It's like the most generic. Pinky is kind of different because it's so small and it's more curved. Thumb is basically just like a finger except for it's missing a knuckle. But what we're going to do is we're going to take this generic finger and we're just going to duplicate it because I don't want to do that again. I don't want to have to model my base mesh for all of those fingers separately. I just want to build one, and then I'm kind of uniform scaling that down. And then I might do the rest of the shaping just by pulling the verts here. I don't want to scale it too much because the fingers, like the index finger and the middle finger and the ring finger, are all roughly the same size in terms of diameter. And so you don't want to change it too much or else it starts looking weird. And then I'm just going to get the rotation proper, and then I want to scale it down uniform, but again, not too much. There we go. And you can also do this too, so you can just scale it down non-uniform scale, which will preserve the width of everything. And I usually do a combination of those two, so let's undo that. So I'll scale it down just a hair, and then I'll scale it like this. Okay, cool. And then finally the pinky. The pinky is a lot smaller than the rest of the fingers. So this one I can uniform scale. and put it in place. Cool. And then finally the thumb. And the thumb's a little bit weird because you can see that each one of these fingers has 2 knuckles, like 1, 2. The thumb only has 1 that's exposed, and then the third knuckle is actually buried inside of your palm, so you just don't see it. So this one, we're actually going to cut it off and sew it in there. The other thing about your thumb that is worth noting is your thumb does not lay down flat like the rest of the fingers. In fact, all your fingers are kind of pitched a little bit like this. The pinky and the index finger the most, and then the thumb even more than those. But I prefer not to do that rotation just yet. I like to keep them all whirled up because we still have a lot of shaping to do on this hand, and so I like to keep them kind of world coordinates so that I can do all the shaping, and then later I'll start doing all the subtle organic shaping. So for the thumb, also the thumb is a lot wider in diameter than my middle finger, so I also want to scale that up. So I'm going to scale up the thumb. And then the other thing that the thumb does is the thumb is rotated at about 45 degrees. So it does not lay flat like this. It rotates at between like 30 and 40 degrees. So I'm going to rotate the thumb. The other thing the thumb does is the thumb also kind of is rotated in this direction as well. So, and if I do that at a base position, it's going to make for a better looking model. And so I'm going to do those two things right away. I'm going to rotate it down a little bit, and I'm going to rotate it this way about 30 or 45 degrees. All right, cool. Now that I've done those things, I am ready to go ahead and cut this knuckle off. So, and delete that. Let's hide this. I'm done with my reference now. Don't really need that anymore. We're to the point now where we want to start merging the fingers onto the palm. So, and the way this is done is we're going to cut a hole here. So I'm going to go into face mode and select all of these faces here that we don't need. Oh, I forgot. I want to do one thing before I do that. If you'll notice here, my fingers have 8 sides, and there's an edge that kind of runs right down the middle. And on my palm, my base palm here, it's missing that edge. So I'm going to come in here to edge, insert edge loop, and I'm going to add an edge loop right down the middle. I knew I missed something. There we go. And now I have enough edges to accommodate those fingers. And now I can delete those faces. So I'm going to come in here to face mode. Grab all of the faces on the front. And then I'm going to just end up with one giant hole there. Okay, now I am ready to attach all the fingers and do a final shaping pass, which will wrap up this first stage of modeling a human hand. So I'm going to select my palm here and my index finger, and I'm going to say combine. And then I'm just going to use the target weld to weld this thing up. So what I usually like to do when I'm welding from one mesh to another is I like to look at the shape of one versus the other. And so the shape on the finger is probably closer to the actual shape I need for the hand. This one is kind of a boxy Flintstones shape that doesn't really work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge these vertices, and I'm going to weld the vertices from the palm to the finger, which is going to give me a slightly better shape. So I'm going to hold down the shift key and right click, and I'm going to go into target weld. And I want to target weld these kind of in an orderly fashion. So I want to go, this vertex right here goes there. And then I'm going to just kind of go clockwise. So there, there. And then you'll notice that when I get to this middle one, I don't have another vertex at the moment to weld to. So I'm going to skip that one and just go down here and be like, okay, I'm going to go here to here to here. There we go. And see, now my finger is welded on there. And now that that's done, now I'm going to do the next finger. So I'm going to go, okay, select both these guys, mesh, combine. And again, I want to start welding, so I'm going to go target weld, and I'm going to do this one, and Let's see here, this one. And you can see here on these two, we kind of have this weird discrepancy. So for these, I want to split the difference. So if I target weld this guy right now, and I move it here, it's kind of like favoring the middle finger too much. And what I really want that to do is be split equally between those two vertices when I weld it. So a better weld to use on this one would be merge vertices, merge to center, because it's going to split the difference between those and give me a nice edge right down there, the middle of the finger. And so I'm going to do the same thing on this one. I'm going to grab those two and I'm going to say merge to center, and it's going to split the difference. All right, cool. And again, on this one, I can't weld that to anything because it doesn't have a dance partner. So I'm going to come under to this one and go OK. And I want to go vertex, merge, target weld. And this one, I'm going to target weld. Whoops. This is something that this tool does every single time, and it's really annoying. It will like keep a vertex selected even though you didn't select it. So again, you have to click off in the empty space to get it to deselect that before you go select a new one. I don't know why it does that. It's annoying, but it does. Okay, now I have this vertex and this vertex going together. If I target weld that, again, I end up with a stupid shape. It's favoring one side too much. So where I have ones that need to split the difference, I want to select both of these guys and say merge to center, which now that will average the distance, and I get a much better weld there. Okay, the next one I want to do is the ring finger. So I'm going to select them both and say mesh combine. And then I'm going to go into vertex mode and target weld. So target weld this one. Whoops. It did that same thing where it had a vertex selected, and I don't know how it does it, but it does. So deselect. Cool. These two guys need to average. So I'm going to do merge to center to average those. This one doesn't yet have a dance partner, so I'm going to skip it. And I'm going to come to this one, target weld, and I want to weld this guy to this guy, and this guy to this guy. And then now these need to average. So I'm going to do the ones here in the middle first, merge to center, and then this one, merge to center. There we go. Final one is the pinky. So I'm going to combine it, and then vertex mode. And it did its silly trick again. Okay. All right, sweet. And then now I want to average these. So I'm going to say merge to center. Sometimes you got to go into wireframe too, because vertices get buried, and the only way to see them is to get into wireframe mode, where you can kind of go like, okay, I think those are the two verts I need. Yes, that was it. And then I'm going to say merge to center. And then I'll do this one here, merge to center. Another thing you really want to be careful of with merge to center is that you don't have a bunch of vertices selected, because it'll do things like that. With newbies, I always see that. What happened to my model? And I'm like, you definitely merged to center on accident. So don't be that newbie. And just pay attention and make sure that when you use merge to center, that you only have two vertices selected. There we go. Okay, so I got all the fingers welded on. And now for the hardest one, I always save the hardest for last. I want to do the thumb. So the thumb is going to go right into this slot. So those two faces right there. Okay, so I'm going to cut those out, and I'll do that a little bit slower. So these two faces right on the side. And now I'm going to grab the thumb and the hand, and I'm going to combine them. And then for this, we need to add one extra edge here. Whoops. Same, just like we did with the fingers, we had to add an extra edge down the middle. For the thumb, we have to do the same thing. So I'm going to say mesh, insert edge loops, and I'm going to insert an edge loop right there. And then now I'm ready to start welding this thing up. So I'm going to go into vertex mode and use the target weld. And this guy here goes there. That looked like it had multiples, so I'm going to unclick and there we go. And then I start going around clockwise. So let me see. This one goes here. This one goes here. This one goes here. And no. Let's check something real fast. So I'm going to check the poly count here to see if somehow I ended up with an extra edge on the thumb versus the palm. So I'm going to say display polygons. No, display heads up display poly count. And if I double click, it'll select all the edges and it'll tell me how many edges I have. So I have 8 edges there. And then I'm going to double click the opening here and I want to see that I have 8 edges there. So I do have 8 edges on both. And so I just made a mistake somewhere. So I'm going to do this again. So I'm going to go vertex mode. And I want to target weld. So I'm going to go there. This is very important. I want this edge on the side of the hand to also be on the side of the thumb so that it creates a clean loop. You see that? It loops all the way around. That's very important. So what I could do knowing that is I think I'm going to just make this connection here and go, okay, let's connect that one there so that I know the 2 side ones are connected properly. And it will make my job a little bit easier of connecting the in-betweens because it kind of makes it foolproof. Because you just have to go, okay, that one's there. Okay, the next one goes to the next available opening, to the next available opening, to the next available opening. And so there I was able to simplify that to make it idiot proof. And now I've got a good connection there. This shape is god-awful between the thumb and the palm. And this is where we now just go into caveman modeling. And so caveman modeling is pulling points. And so as a caveman, I'm just going to go in here and be like, okay, now I get to fix this a little bit. I pull the palm back. I've got this twisted up here, so I can kind of manually untwist it. I like to use silhouettes. So silhouettes are when you lay your camera down to the side, and it really makes pulling points a lot easier because you can kind of grab the points you need, use the silhouette, and get the shape you want. Whereas if you're just kind of like blindly pulling points without a reference point, it kind of makes it harder. Alright, so I know that on the thumb I have a knuckle that goes right about there. So I want to try to like model that in a little bit. This needs to start to flow up the thumb a little bit. So I'm going to add that flow there. And the palm also should be a little bit fatter. The thumb kind of makes like a chicken wing shape right there. And so I want to get that in. And it's important to note that on this pass, the shaping that I'm doing, I'm definitely not trying to nail the shape. I'm just trying to block it in. All right, so I'm not trying to make it look perfect. There's not enough resolution at the moment to do that. I'm just trying to get it close to the proportions of a hand with its existing crappy low resolution. All right, so let's grab these a little bit. Alrighty. So I think I have the thumb kind of worked out decently. Here, this is a really bad shape because if you look at your knuckles, it kind of gets fatter here on the palm. And so I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, dude, I need to insert an edge loop right there. And that's going to allow me to do two things. I can shape, then put some knuckles on top of the palm by kind of bowing these up a little bit. And then also add the pads on the bottom of the palm to fatten those up a little bit. I'm going to grab those and pull those down. All right, and so at this resolution, this is kind of optimal base mesh resolution. I could probably put an extra edge loop right in there safely. Oops, so I'm going to do that, insert edge loop. And I'm going to turn on insert with edge flow, which is going to try to bounce it so that it shapes it a little bit with the shaping that I already put into it. And this is kind of optimal base mesh resolution before we start really aggressively shaping this thing. So it's kind of optimized for rigging, and it's low enough poly that we can start doing more aggressive shaping on our next pass, which will be the next phase, which we'll do tomorrow. I always break this into two pieces. So first task is to build a base mesh like this that's like pretty decent scale proportion, and then the next phase is we're going to actually start aggressively adding more and more shape to it, including articulated fingernails and everything else, webbing, the whole 9 yards. But this is where you guys want to get, so that's where I want what I want you to have done by our next session, which will be tomorrow. All right, so we'll pick it up then. And my Bandicam always disappears, so I don't know where it puts it. Click on the tray icon to restore Bandicam. There is no tray icon, so click on that, I guess. No, Bandicam just disappears, and I have to type this to wake it back up. There it is. Strange.